Welcome to our deep dive
Okay.
into Show Me the Money
Excellent.
by Alan Barrell.
Right.
So this book
Yeah.
really digs into the world of entrepreneurship and funding, particularly in the UK. So if you're looking for insights on how to secure those early investments, this is the deep dive for you.
I think it's really interesting that the book actually starts off by really looking at what entrepreneurship is.
Right.
And I like that because it goes kind of beyond just
Oh, absolutely.
sort of the starting a business thing, you know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's something that really piques my curiosity,
Uh-huh.
How is an entrepreneur different from somebody that manages an already existing business,
Yeah, and the book actually kind of uses a bit of economic theory to sort of illustrate this point.
Okay.
So Joseph Schumpeter,
Right.
who's a really renowned economist, sort of argued that entrepreneurs are not the owners of capital, but the drivers of innovation.
So they're not just working with what's already there. They're really thinking outside of the box.
That's right. They identify these opportunities that perhaps other people wouldn't see, and they're prepared to take a calculated risk.
Now, the book actually spotlights Cambridge as a really interesting entrepreneurial hub.
Uh-huh.
And I was actually really surprised by it.
It is quite remarkable. So
Okay.
Cambridge, a relatively small city, right,
Yeah.
has generated at least 50 billion pounds worth of market capitalization.
Wow.
And that's more than a lot of entire countries generate.
That's incredible.
And that's from companies that have actually originated in Cambridge, like Domino Printing Sciences and Abcam.
Right. So it really is punching above its weight.
It is.
What is it about Cambridge that has made it so successful?
Well, the book sort of attributes it to the kind of unique ecosystem they have there.
Uh-huh.
So you've got this concentration of talent, the research institutions, and then you've got a network of investors who are all sort of ready to support these really sort of audacious ideas.
So it's also like all of the right ingredients in one spot.
It is a real sort of melting pot.
Now let's talk about how these startups actually get the money that they need to get off the ground.
Okay.
Now, Show Me the Money introduces this concept called the risk finance ladder.
Right?
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, imagine a ladder,
Okay.
right? And each rung of the ladder sort of symbolizes a different stage of funding. So you start at the bottom with personal funds.
Okay.
Then you go to friends and family, and then you move to angel investors, and then right at the top is venture capital.
Okay, so as you go up this ladder, obviously the amount of money increases, but what other things change?
Well, I think what changes the trade-off you make, right?
Right.
So at the lower levels, you have more control, but obviously less capital.
Right.
As you go higher up the ladder, you can access much larger sums, but then of course you're giving away more of the ownership.
And control, potentially.
Yeah, so it's all about kind of trying to work out where you are in that ladder.
Now, venture capital is often seen as this kind of mysterious world that can either make or break a company.
Absolutely.
What insights does the book offer on this world?
Well, I think the first thing that the book makes really clear is that venture capital is not this homogenous entity.
Oh, really?
So there are all these different breeds of VCs.
Oh, wow.
They all have different strategies and different objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So some might specialize in really early stage, high risk
Right.
ventures, whereas others may be more comfortable with sort of later stage or buyouts.
So it's not just finding a venture capitalist, it's finding the right venture capitalist.
Exactly. It's about finding that fit.
Now, is venture capital the only option once you've sort of gone past the friends and family stage?
Not at all. So the book actually dedicates quite a lot of time to the role of what are called business angels.
Okay.
These are people who are investing their own money in startups.
And what motivates them to do that?
Well, I think it's a mixture of things.
Okay.
A lot of them are driven by a real passion for innovation.
Uh-huh.
They want to kind of see new ideas come to life and make a difference.
I guess they want to be a part of that journey.
Exactly. And interestingly, the book actually reveals that angels who have got relevant industry experience actually do much better than those who don't.
So it's not just about having money to invest, it's about knowing the area that you're investing in.
Exactly. Experience really counts.
Now, we've talked about venture capital, we've talked about business angels, but what about crowdfunding?
Oh, yeah. So the book recognizes the rise of crowdfunding.
Right.
And it sees it as a really democratizing force.
Right.
Because it allows a much wider range of people to invest in startups.
Okay. And do they talk about any specific platforms?
They do. They talk about a platform called Syndicate Room.
Okay, and what's interesting about that?
Well, what's interesting is that it partners with established business angel networks.
Oh, okay.
So rather than just having a crowd of individual investors, you have lead investors who are actually setting the valuation for the startup.
Right, so that gives it a little bit more structure?
Yeah, a bit more grounding.
So lots of options beyond just those traditional bank loans or... Absolutely.
Venture capital.
Definitely.
Now, one of the things the book emphasizes is this idea of getting the basics right from the start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So company formation establishment needs to be done really professionally.
Okay.
You need to make sure everything's legally compliant.
Right.
That your accounting systems are sound.
So it's about having those strong foundations in place.
It is. And actually taking advice from experienced people like lawyers and accountants.
Right. So what are some of the key takeaways you got from the book about negotiating with funders?
Well, the book basically says that your bargaining position is at its strongest when you've got time on your side.
Oh, okay. So don't wait until the last minute.
Don't leave it till you're desperate.
Don't leave it till you're desperate.
Seek funding when you don't necessarily need it right now.
Right.
Because it can be a long process.
And what about the difference between debt and equity financing?
Well, show me the money really spells out the difference between these two main avenues.
So equity financing is where you're selling a bit of your company. You're giving people a stake in the business.
Okay.
Debt financing is where you borrow money, which has to be repaid.
Right. So with equity, you're sharing the potential rewards, but also the risks.
Exactly.
With debt, it's more of a fixed obligation.
Yeah.
Now, the book also really emphasizes the need for a well-structured business plan. Why is this document so important?
Well, I think the point the book makes is that it's not just about pleasing investors, right?
Right.
It's a really valuable exercise for yourself.
Okay.
Because it clarifies your direction, maps out your strategy.
Makes you really think about all the details.
Exactly. And it forces you to really articulate what you're trying to achieve.
So it's not just a document, it's a process.
It's a process of thinking.
Now, I'm sure our listeners are keen to know how to pitch to investors in a way that really captures their attention.
Right.
What did you learn from the book about this crucial aspect?
Well, it basically boils down to this interplay between substance and style, right? It's not just about having a flashy presentation.
Right.
It's about really understanding your audience.
So do your research know who you're talking to?
Exactly. Know their interests, their motivations, and then tailor your pitch to show how you meet their needs.
So almost like customizing a product?
Yeah, like a bespoke pitch.
Okay.
And the other thing the book really stresses is the importance of storytelling.
Oh.
So it's not just about bombarding people with numbers and data.
Right.
It's about creating a narrative that connects with them on an emotional level.
Okay, so don't just appeal to their head, appeal to their heart.
Exactly. Investors are people too.
What other insights did you get from the book about delivering that perfect pitch?
Right. Well, I think one of the things that really came through was this idea of conciseness.
Right.
Investors are busy people. They're hearing pitches all the time, so you need to capture their attention quickly.
Okay, so cut to the chase.
Exactly. Use short, impactful sentences, strong verbs, vivid language that really paints a picture.
Almost like you're creating a movie in their minds.
Yeah, a little mini movie. And the other thing is,
Okay.
don't underestimate the power of visuals.
Right, a good slide deck.
A good slide deck can really make a difference.
Not too many slides, right?
No, you don't want to hide behind the slides.
Okay.
You still need to connect with the audience.
Right, so it's a balance.
It is. And the other thing that may seem really obvious.
Like internal rate of return.
Right, IRR and net present value, or NPV.
Okay, so even if you're not a finance expert, you need at least a basic grasp.
Right, you need to be able to speak their language.
Okay.
And the book actually does a good job of explaining these concepts in a way that's understandable.
Right.
So, for example, it points out that IRR isn't just about the total profit you make,
Okay.
but also about the time it takes to make that profit.
So a quick return is better than a slow return.
Generally, yes, because investors want to see their money working for them quickly.
And that's where NPV comes in.
Right. NPV takes into account the time value of money.
Okay.
So $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow.
Because you could invest that dollar today and it could grow.
Exactly. So NPV helps investors figure out if the future cash flows of a business are worth the initial investment.
Right.
Even after accounting for that time value of money.
So these concepts can be complicated, but the book breaks them down quite well.
It does, and it even uses real-life case studies to show how these calculations work in practice.
Are there any that particularly stood out to you?
Well, there's the story of HearCorp,
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
which is a company developing a new hearing aid device.
It's a really good example of the back and forth between entrepreneurs and investors.
It is. The book goes through their whole journey, from pitching to angels to negotiating with VCs.
And how they actually get the valuation and all that.
Exactly how much equity they give away, how the funding rounds affect the capital structure.
So it really brings those financial concepts to life.
It does. It shows them in action.
Right.
And it also looks at the complexities of negotiating term sheets, shareholder agreements.
Right. All that legal stuff.
Yeah, making sure you understand the implications of every deal.
So it's not just about getting the money. It's about getting the right deal.
Absolutely. It's a partnership.
Now, one thing I found interesting is this idea of pivoting.
Right.
That you don't always have to stick to the original plan.
Yeah, a lot of people, especially those new to entrepreneurship, might think you just come up with a plan and execute it perfectly.
Right, like it's all set in stone.
But in reality, things change.
Okay.
The market changes, your customers change.
So you have to be flexible.
Exactly. The book actually says that your initial plan is basically a hypothesis.
It's starting point.
Yeah, you test it, you gather data.
And you may have to change course completely.
You might have to pivot. And the book gives loads of examples of successful companies that pivoted multiple times.
Wow.
Before finding their winning formula.
So it's not a sign of failure?
No, it's a sign of adaptability.
Which is essential in the business world.
Absolutely. Things change constantly.
Now let's go back to pitching.
Okay.
The book talks a lot about crafting that compelling pitch.
Yes.
What really stood out to you as being crucial?
Well, the first thing is knowing your audience.
Okay.
It's not about having a one-size-fits-all pitch.
So you tailor it.
You tailor it to each investor.
How do you do that?
Well, you do your research. You find out about their investment history, their risk appetite, what kind of companies they like to back.
And then you show them how you fit into that.
Exactly. You present yourself as the perfect match.
So it's like a customized product again.
It is. It's about understanding their needs.
Okay.
And the other thing is the importance of storytelling.
Oh, right. We touched on that before.
We did, but it's worth repeating.
Okay.
Because it's so important. You need to create a narrative that captures their imagination.
Right, so they're not just looking at numbers.
Exactly, make them feel something.
Okay, so appeal to their emotions.
Yes, because at the end of the day, investors are people too.
They're not robots.
No, they're driven by emotions as well as logic.
What else did you learn about delivering a pitch that really makes an impact? I think one of the things that struck me is that actually securing funding, which is often seen as the kind of the holy grail for startups.
Yes.
It's really just one step in the journey.
Absolutely.
Show me the money actually reminds us that the real work begins.
Right.
Once you've got those funds in place.
It's like you've gathered all the ingredients for a really complicated recipe.
Okay.
Now you've got to actually cook the dish.
The book really stresses the importance of leadership and building the right team.
It does.
What did you take away from that section?
Well, I think the point it makes is that as a company grows and evolves, the demands on the leadership change as well.
What works for a small, nimble startup might not work.
Right.
For a much larger, more complex organization.
And I think what's interesting is that it suggests that sometimes the founding entrepreneur might not actually be the best person to lead the company through all its different stages.
That must be a difficult thing for some founders to accept.
Yeah, but it's probably a reality for a lot of companies.
So what advice does the book give for kind of managing that transition?
Well, it talks about the importance of bringing in experienced executives that can kind of complement the founder's strengths and take the company through these different stages.
So it might be hiring a new CEO. It might be building a strong management team.
It could be setting up a board of directors.
Yeah. And the book also talks about non-executive directors.
Right.
People with specific expertise who can kind of offer guidance and support.
Absolutely. So they're not involved in the day-to-day running of the company.
Right.
But they can provide that kind of outside perspective.
It's almost like having a group of mentors.
It is, yeah, a wise counsel.
Did any stories about leadership transitions stand out to you?
Well, one that I found really interesting was the story of Domino Printing Sciences.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
The founder was a brilliant inventor.
Right.
But he recognized that he wasn't necessarily the right person to lead the company.
As it grew.
As it scaled up.
And he was willing to step aside.
He actually brought in a new CEO who had the experience to really take the company forward.
So putting the company's needs ahead of his own ego?
Absolutely. And it turned out to be a great decision.
Domino went from strength to strength.
It did, yeah. It became a global leader.
So that's a positive story, but the book also has some cautionary tales.
It does. It shows what can go wrong. if founders try to cling on to control.
Or if that transition isn't managed properly.
Exactly. So it's not just about making a change. It's about doing it in the right way.
Carefully and thoughtfully.
Yeah, with sensitivity.
Finding the right people, making sure everyone's on board.
It's a delicate process.
Now, one final concept I wanted to touch on is this idea of keeping the flame alive.
Oh, yeah.
That entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Keeping that passion going.
Through all the ups and downs.
Because it is a roller coaster.
How does Show Me the Money advise entrepreneurs to stay motivated and resilient?
Well, I think it reminds us that entrepreneurship isn't just about making money.
Right. It's about that vision.
It's about having a vision. It's about making a difference.
It's about building something that you're proud of.
Absolutely. And the book encourages entrepreneurs to stay curious.
Oh, that's a good one.
To embrace challenges, to see them as opportunities to learn.
Right.
And to enjoy the process.
To really find that joy in creation.
Because it's not just about the destination.
It's about the journey.
That's right. And I think that sums up the book really well.
Show Me the Money is full of really practical advice, but it also reminds us that entrepreneurship is ultimately a human endeavor.
A very human endeavor.
It's about passion. It's about creativity.
It is.
It's about striving for something more than just yourself.
Absolutely well said.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
And I hope our listeners are feeling really inspired.
Me too.
To go out there and start their own ventures.
Or to take their existing ventures to the next level.
Now, one final thought for you to ponder.
Okay.
This book was published in 2013.
Right.
And the world has changed quite a bit since then.
It has.
So I want you to think about how the funding landscape has evolved. What new opportunities are out there?
Okay.
What new challenges have emerged?
I like that.
I encourage you to explore those questions further.
It's a good challenge.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into Show Me the Money.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
Keep exploring.
Keep learning.
And keep chasing those dreams.
And, as always, stay curious.
See you next time.